The following video presentation is a part of a series of training aids that were developed for the Certified Aggregate Producer Program through the cooperative efforts of the Indiana Department of Transportation and the Indiana Mineral Aggregates Association. Once material has been sampled in the field, the material then has to be reduced to the appropriate sample size for testing. Depending on the size and type of material to be tested, the technician has several options for reducing the field sample. This presentation will explain which sample reduction methods are appropriate for all sizes and types of samples. Additionally, each sample reduction method will be demonstrated and explained individually. So what are the different sample reduction methods? There are three methods, and they are Method A, mechanical splitter, Method B, quartering, and Method C, miniature stockpile. Now let's have a quick look at each method. Method A, mechanical splitter. Method A employs a mechanical splitting device where the field sample is dropped through a series of riffles, and each particle has an equal chance of dropping into one of the two receiving pans. The width of the chutes are adjustable and are set to a distance based on the nominal maximum particle size of the aggregate being tested. Now let's have a look at Method B, quartering. In this method, a sample is placed onto a surface, mixed, and then shaped into a conical pile. A splitting device is then used to quarter the sample. Subsamples are removed from two opposing quadrants of the quartered sample and combined to represent the first split. Further quartering may be required. Now let's have a look at Method C, miniature stockpile. In this method, a sample is also placed onto a hard, non-porous surface, mixed, and then shaped into a conical pile. However, instead of quartering the sample, a sampling spoon is used to remove portions of the miniature stockpile. These portions are then combined to form the final test sample. So now you know that there are three different types of sample reduction methods, but which method is appropriate for the different types of materials? To determine which method is appropriate, the technician must first ascertain what size the material is, and then what is the moisture condition of that material. And before continuing, we need to define a few terms. Maximum particle size, or MPS. This is defined as the smallest sieve through which 100% of the aggregate sample particles pass. Nominal maximum particle size, or NMPS. This is defined as the largest sieve that retains some of the aggregate particles, but generally not more than 10% by weight. Dry. This condition exists when an aggregate has been dried to constant mass and cooled to room temperature. Air dry. This is a state where the aggregate appears to be dry but still has some absorbed moisture in the pore structure. Moist. This is a condition in which free moisture is present on the aggregate particle surfaces. Saturated surface dry, or SSD. This condition is defined as the point at which there is no free moisture present on the aggregate particle surfaces and the aggregate is in a non-absorbent state, or saturated. The decision process based on aggregate size and moisture condition can be summarized in a table as shown here. As you can see from this table, in some cases, adjusting the moisture condition is permitted in order to use a preferred method. The field samples of aggregate must next be reduced to an appropriate size for testing to determine physical characteristics, such as sieve analysis, soundness, hardness, etc. The methods described in this test method are intended to minimize variations in the aggregate characteristics between the smaller test sample and the larger field sample. Several methods of sample reduction will be described. The technician must be sure to use the appropriate technique dependent on such factors as aggregate size and moisture content. The reduction methods include Method A, mechanical splitter, Method B, quartering, and Method C, miniature stockpile. In some circumstances, reducing the field sample prior to testing is not recommended. Substantial differences may unavoidably occur during sample reduction, i.e., in the case of an aggregate having relatively few large-size particles in the sample. These few particles may be unequally distributed among the reduced-size test samples. If the test sample is being examined for certain contaminants occurring as a few discrete particles in a small percentage, the reduced test sample may not be truly representative of the total aggregate as produced. In these cases, the entire original field sample should be tested. Failure to carefully follow the procedures in these methods of sample reduction may result in providing a non-representative sample for subsequent testing, resulting in inaccurate test results and, ultimately, failure of aggregate to perform as intended. Aggregate and other materials sampled in the field need to be reduced to appropriate sizes for testing. Therefore, it's necessary to reduce field samples while minimizing the chance of variability during handling. In some instances, a few particles on a given sieve might affect a gradation significantly enough to alter an interpretation of the field sample and subsequently the entire material's compliance with specifications. The appropriate field sample reduction method is dependent chiefly on the nominal maximum size of the aggregate, the amount of free moisture in the sample, and the equipment available. The following chart should be used in selecting the appropriate reduction method for the aggregate to be tested. Please note the following. The dryness of the sample can be tested by tightly squeezing a small portion of the sample in the palm of the hand. If the cast crumbles readily, the correct moisture range has been obtained. The mechanical sample splitter shall have an even number of equal width chutes, not less than 8 for coarse or combined aggregate or 12 for fine aggregate. The chutes shall discharge alternately to each side of the splitter. For coarse and combined aggregate, the width of the individual chutes shall be approximately twice the largest size particle in the sample to be reduced. For dry fine aggregate in which the entire sample will pass the 3/8 of an inch sieve, the minimum width of the chutes shall be at least 50% larger than the largest particles in the sample, with a maximum width of 3/4 of an inch. The splitter shall be equipped with at least 2 receptacles, or catch pans, to hold the 2 halves of the sample during splitting. It shall also be equipped with a hopper or straight edge pan with a width equal to or slightly less than the overall width of the assembly of chutes, by which the sample may be fed at a controlled rate into the chutes. Place the original sample, or portion thereof, in the hopper or pan and uniformly distribute it from edge to edge, being sure the sample appears homogeneous or well blended. Carefully introduce the sample into the chutes in a manner to allow the aggregate to flow freely through the openings and into the catch pans. Continue this procedure until the entire sample has been halved, being careful that catch pans do not overflow. Continue splitting 1/2 of the material. Follow this procedure, being sure to split entire increments until the desired test sample size is obtained. Retain the unused material until all desired tests are performed in case a retest is needed. Sometimes a significant amount of fines may be lost in the splitting process if the sample is extremely dry and the action of pouring the sample through the splitter chutes creates a large dust cloud, suspending the fines in the air above the splitter. If this is a serious concern, then add a small amount of water to the original sample and mix thoroughly before splitting the sample. The extra moisture will prevent many of the fines from becoming suspended in the air and drifting off. Remember to not add so much water that the moisture content ends up being at or greater than the SSD condition, in which case the mechanical splitting method would no longer be valid. In any case, be sure to perform the splitting procedure in a well-ventilated area while wearing a suitable dust mask. Method B. Procedure. Place the original sample on a hard, clean, level surface. Mix the material thoroughly by turning the entire sample over with the shovel at least 3 times. With the last turning, shovel the entire sample into a conical pile by depositing each shovelful on top of the preceding one. Carefully flatten the conical pile to a uniform thickness and diameter by pressing down the apex with the shovel so that each quarter section of the resulting pile will contain the material originally in the pile. The pile diameter should be approximately 4 to 8 times the thickness. Divide the flattened pile into 4 equal quarters with the shovel or trowel. Remove 2 diagonally opposite quarters, including all fine material. Brush the cleared spaces clean. Successively mix and quarter the remaining material in the same fashion as the original sample. Continue this process until the desired quantity is obtained. Save the unused portion of the original field sample until all testing is completed in case a retest is needed. As an alternative to method B, when the floor surface is uneven, the field sample may be placed on a canvas blanket and mixed with the shovel, or by alternatively lifting each corner of the blanket and pulling the blanket over the sample toward the diagonally opposite corner, causing the material to be rolled. Flatten and divide the pile as described in method B, or if the surface beneath the blanket is too uneven, insert a stick or pipe dividing the pile into 2 equal parts. Remove the stick, leaving a fold in the canvas between the sample halves. Slide the stick under the canvas blanket again at a right angle to the first division and dissecting the 2 halves of the sample through their centers. Lift the stick evenly from both ends, dividing the sample into equal quarters. Remove 2 diagonal parts, including the fine material, and clean the area. Successively mix and quarter the remaining material until the desired sample size is obtained. Notes: the quartering method is fairly time-intensive and thus is generally used in situations where an adequate mechanical splitter is unavailable. Diligence and care is required to ensure that the samples obtained by quartering remain representative of the entire field sample. Method C, miniature stockpile. Procedure. Please note the following. This method is used for damp, fine aggregate only. Place the field sample on a hard, clean, level surface where there will be no loss of material or contamination. Mix the sample by turning the entire sample over 3 times with a shovel. With the last turning, shovel the entire sample into a conical pile by depositing each shovelful on top of the preceding one. Obtain a sample for each test to be performed by selecting at least 5 increments of material at random locations from the miniature stockpile using a sample thief, small scoop, or spoon. This concludes our presentation. Please consult your CAP training manual and respective test method for more detailed information.